Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman, and we're talking Main Street and the small business lenders that help it grow. Lance Sexton, it's always good to see you. Thank you so much. And
good to be
here. A voice from the past. I don't know if you want to be referred to as past. Dustin Baker, I love this, had his first grown-up job with Nagel, where he was in charge of marketing or working in marketing. Dustin, good, thank you for reaching out to us. You're out of Oklahoma. Tell us about the SBA Roadshow very quickly. What is that about?
It's just an itch that I decided to scratch, Bob, when, like everybody else, I was tired of not seeing everybody in our industry. And so what started with an idea of let's go see some clients turn into an idea of how do we share stories, build some community that we can kind of push out as a gift to the industry as we're all kind of waiting to get back together again. And so we've been talking to SBA lenders and small business borrowers in a lot of different cities, and we've taken that content to YouTube and we're sharing it with everybody. So
that's awesome. Hey, Joseph, let's go ahead and run this little clip here. We're still experimenting with video in our presentations. And here's a little 30-second clip of what Justin does. We'll see how this works out. If you have a problem, contact Mike at colemanreport.com. Go ahead.
The only show ever produced to highlight our industry and the good that it does in communities all over this country every day. Travel with me from my home in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as I collect stories from SBA lenders and small business borrowers coast to coast and all the places in between. Be inspired, be engaged, be a part of the story, and all the cool kids are doing it.
Well, that was glitchy, but Lance, how was it at your end? Lance, you're on mute also.
It looked great, and that's a very exciting concept, Dustin, telling the positive news of the SBA good citizens across the country.
There we go. If you had a problem with that, I'll send an email. You could chat Mike right in the chat box there. Anyway, Dustin, we're still playing around with technology. I know you are. Was that your van that I saw there? Is that your little truck?
Yeah, the Sprinter van may have to wait for a future season and maybe a Kickstarter campaign. That's my pickup truck that I bought to drive all over the place with.
So where have you driven? Where have you been?
Season one, we kind of left from Tulsa, went to Oxford, Mississippi, Nashville, Louisville, Kentucky, Cincinnati, and Chicago before we came back home. And season two was Mountain West, so we went through Denver, Park City, Salt Lake, and then back. So yeah, we've been a few places.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, I think that, look, I think our job is to talk about the positive of the programs. The PPP has been great for Main Street, for entrepreneurs. It's been well needed. We're going to go through some stats on that. And unfortunately, sometimes these negative stories come out and we need to combat them with success stories. Right, Dustin?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, if you got involved in PPP at all, and Lance, I know you'll nod your head to this, you kind of got to see the ugly underbelly and kind of what comes out when, sort of quote, free government funds become available. And it's easy to lose sight of all the really positive things that happen, sacrifices people made to sort of prop the economy up. And our sector got to be on the tip of the spear. And so we wanted to dig into some of the good stories, because there's a lot more of those than the bad ones. They just don't get above the fold very often. So we want to try and put them there.
Well, very good. Do we have Dustin's contact information up on this? How do we get a hold of you, Dustin?
Oh, if folks want to learn about the show, they can just go to sbaroadshow.com, and all of our contact information is in there. And we're on all the platforms too, at SBA Roadshow. So that's the easiest way to track us down.
Well, we're going to get into very good. Well, I really appreciate it. You're welcome to stick around and answer some questions and see what we do. You're welcome to log off. It's your call.
Well, the cool thing, Bob,
for a little bit, Bob. Thank you.
The cool thing, Bob, is Dustin is very close to me. Tulsa's probably about 160 miles from me.
Are you in Northwest Arkansas, Lance?
I'm actually in Clarksville, Arkansas, Dustin.
Okay.
I was in Springdale for 20 years and relocated to Clarksville a couple of years ago, but I'm still pretty close to you. I'm about a 2.5-hour drive.
We may have to talk afterwards and find a middle spot and grab some barbecue somewhere. Be great.
Oh, sounds good.
As much as I like geography, that's not the topic. We're going to move on. What I want to turn to, this has been a recurring theme. I know this is near and dear to Lance's heart. Section 1112 payments are starting to run out based upon the dates that the loans were funded. And it's a poorly worded question, obviously. It should be what increase, not your total precision, but what increase of your delinquencies.
Well, and Bob, my reason for the question centers around the fact that all the existing SBA portfolio prior to the pandemic had 6 payments made for them. Then they had to make a couple, but then they had 2 more payments made for them. Many of those now have ended. The restaurant and hospitality industry still has a couple payments left in 1112 payments, but we're going to start to see how the portfolio is doing, because it's been propped up by 1112 payments now for the better part of a year.
Right. And obviously, and that's what we're anticipating, is that's going to start increasing, which leads us to our second question, which is, do you think PPP loans lowered small business delinquencies? This is what they call a softball, Lance.
Yeah, I was going to say, if this is not close, if this is not close to 100%, Bob, I'm going to be surprised.
There we go. Very good. And we have to make everyone feel. All right, a little bit more tougher. Double poll question. How much is bank income up in 2020 over 2019? And we actually should have had one that's not up at all.
It's up.
30%, 38% said 30%, 44% said 20%, and 4% said 40%. The answer is it's up by about a third. It's a little bit, 36%. And the big driver of that, according to the Fed, Lance, is fee income.
Yeah.
And where does fee income come from?
Well, a lot of it came from the PPP loan program. So,
and, yeah.
Well, I think that the fee income comes from a variety of sources, but the PPP loan program was certainly a large component of that during 2020 and will be in 2021 as well. So banks have performed very well in 2020 and are doing well in 2021, but we are going to have to, Bob, as I always say, dust off our servicing and liquidation hats and get ready, because we're not completely out of this. Some small businesses, now that the government support is running out, will struggle, and we'll, as good SBA servicers, are going to find ways to help keep those businesses operating.
Absolutely. Bank income's also up. Strong secondary market is supporting bank income.
Yes.
In terms of there's institutions that rely on that heavily. Some of the larger ones, it's a blip on their financial statement. For the smaller community banks, credit unions, nonprofits, absolutely essential. We'll talk more about the report. In fact, we're going to talk about this Federal Reserve report, but let me just ask a basic question. Who is the Fed? Let's see, 59% say it's a government entity, 19% say it's a public-private partnership, and 22% say it's a private entity. Lance, I'm going to put you on the spot. What is it?
Bob, the Federal Reserve is a government entity.
But who owns it?
Huh?
You're wrong. You're wrong. Actually, it's made up by the member banks. It's not a government. It's not a formal government entity in terms of it gets funded by the government, whatever. Obviously, it's highly regulated. We had 59% say government entity, 19% say public-private partnership. it's very murky. I would probably put it there. If you want, technically, you could say it's private because who owns the Fed? The member banks.
Yeah.
Well, who controls the member banks, the regulators, et cetera, et cetera. But the reason why I say that is I remember once they gave all the salaries and whatever, they're not tied to the government. I gave a speech to the Fed, and they paid me, and they made it clear this is from the Fed and not the government. But the Fed's interesting. They do a lot of studies, and this one just came out yesterday. And if you want to read the whole report, 80-page report, we have it attached in our email this morning. But as we said, number one, Main Street recovery, this is their statement. It remains unclear. And they compared where we are in this recession to past recessions. And they say, and I'm quoting him, the recovery for Main Street remains uneven, but is on par with previous recessions. Dustin, I'm going to throw that at you since you're still here. What do you think they're talking about?
I don't know that there's any comparison point for this recession compared to previous ones. I don't think they have a blueprint to kind of know how to interpret it. And so it sounds like they just don't want to trip over a bad interpretation.
Oh, very good. And what office are you running for, Dustin? That's a great political comment. I love it.
Good answer, Bob.
Why don't you take the hot potato back, Bob?
Well, and
Lance,
I think the key, Bob, is the cause of this recession is different than the causes of previous recessions. So it's different. I mean, it's not caused by over-enthusiastic real estate lending. You know,
demand is there. Now, different types of demand, but the demand is there. Supply, obviously, in terms of restaurants and other movie theaters, that's gone. It's coming back slowly. But
you know, in 08, 09, Bob, there was very little money available for people to borrow, and there's plenty now.
And again, the difference between, and I think what they're talking about is recovery, because if you compare this with 08, 09, every Friday we got the notice of another small community bank that was being closed by the federales, and bank closures, and people were being laid off, and the uncertainty was how bad is it going to be. This recession we already knew how it was going to end. The virus was going to burn itself out, and we all get vaccinated, and looks like that we're on track. There are blips, but it looks like we're all right in terms of how we figured this was going to end. This is interesting. The last one is that the Fed believes bankers anticipate an increase in loan demand, but Main Street isn't really embracing that. And I take that back to 08, 09. I think entrepreneurs are very much debt adverse, and they're a whole lot smarter than they were 10, 15 years ago, Lance. Well, there's so many more tools they can run a successful business. What do you think about that, Lance?
Well, I think that entrepreneurs are concerned about taking on additional debt. You know, I see a cautious optimism in the entrepreneurial community. Not saying that if a great opportunity comes up, they're not going to pursue it and use debt to pursue that. But I see more well thought out opportunities now than I see, you know, in the past, you might just get a plethora of loan opportunities presented to you. Some of them made sense. Some of them did not. Now it seems like most of the opportunities that I see are pretty well thought out. You know, appropriate planning's in place. So I don't see this great surge in small businesses wanting debt, but I don't see the demand, you know, dying. There's still plenty.
No, it's not dying, but it's Dustin, you're too young to remember this, but Lance and I very clearly remember when we started our careers, prime was 21.5%.
Yes.
So when you're talking to someone, say, by the way, crunch the numbers. What happens if your prime plus 2 loan is 23.5%? What's going to happen with your payments on that? Lance and I we're not predicting that, but
well, Bob, I was sharing the story of the first house I bought with someone in my family, and I bought it on a first-time homeowner's loan back in the early 80s, and the interest rate was like 11.5%.
Oh, you're going to let me guess. I was going to say 11.5%.
That was considered an exceptional mortgage rate, where I bought a house about a year ago, Bob, and my rate is 2.7.
Yeah.
Big difference in the payment on this house. The house is about 3.5 times larger, is pretty similar to the payment on my first house.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. What we are saying from this is, while the landscape constantly changes, it will continue to change. We can't be lulled into a false sense of security. We see CRE is getting hammered. Loan delinquencies are on the rise. But as we open up, the demand continues to be strong. There's people like Dustin who are just, and I was in that boat last week, Dustin. I had to get on the road and you can get out of Dodge. So,
well, and I think the thing Bob Dustin can probably share with us in his road trip, small business entrepreneurs are resilient. They will find a way to make it work. So, yes, we've had a pandemic. Yes, there's been some struggles. But, in the same place we see small businesses closed, we'll see new entrepreneurs step in with new concepts to replace those.
Dustin, in your travels, main themes and talking to these entrepreneurs, anything stand out?
Yeah, there's one just to dovetail with what you just said, and that is almost every one of them said, there's been a lot of adversity. We found some opportunities inside of it, and we're doing things that we wouldn't have been able to do if the pandemic hadn't happened. I mean, I think entrepreneurs are more than just resilient. They're pretty resourceful and opportunistic. And so, there's whole sectors that are kind of shut down necessarily because of the pandemic, and there's a lot of folks that are thriving, that were able to do some things that would have been possible otherwise. So, that idea of opportunity and adversity, I think, is the one theme through the first, 8 cities or so that's just been repetitive.
Good. Yeah. How did you pick your people that you interviewed? You just walked in, or were they referrals? Or
Yeah.
You walked in with the camera and said, "Hey, buddy, I want to talk to you."
Exactly. Yeah. They were very receptive to that.
They love to talk about their business. Good for you.
I was fortunate to have 22 years of relationships with kind of SBA division managers to fall on. And so I looked at the map and I thought, where are the first 5 people that I can't show anything to going to say yes? And once they said yes, I said, by the way, I need you to give me 2 or 3 stories to choose from of borrowers in your portfolio who wouldn't exist without an SBA loan. And then I picked the ones that sounded most fun, the music venue, the distillery. And so really, I just kind of hustled my own relationships. And now we've got a lot of folks saying, hey, how can we help get you connected with people in our portfolio for the next time around? So we had to start somewhere, and that's where we started.
Choose one story. What's the most fantastic story you've heard?
Oh, geez.
Just one.
There's in season 2, we sat down with an OBGYN who is the only remaining private practicing OBGYN in all of northern Colorado. All the others have been gobbled up. She has this story where she was able to buy the property from her former partner who passed away, and she bought it from the family at half of what it was worth, still wouldn't qualify without an SBA loan, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer the first week of the pandemic shutting everything down. And several doctors from that community who she was not, they weren't her backups. They became her backups, kept her practice alive as she was staying alive so she could step right back into it and continue to provide a level of service that folks in that community couldn't get if there wasn't an independently practicing person there. So that's a pretty special one.
You hit a lot of you hit a lot of points. Rural hospital care is a huge issue for our country. Independent operators is huge. Good for you. That was great. Let's see. We talked about this, Lance, and you're going to talk about it next week in your webinar. The Fed says PPP loans are lowering their delinquencies, and that a lot of the institutions have booked high loan reserves, and they're anticipating that. But again, it is an uncharted, uneven seascape as we go forward. Let's see. The other thing is, banking. C&I boxes are shrinking. Primarily commercial real estate. Is that they did a survey that said we're talking about Main Street companies with revenues less than $50 million. Reasons for the tightening include an uncertain economic forecast, worsening of problems in some industries such as hotel, restaurant, and retail industries, Lance. No shock there.
Absolutely not, Bob. There are certain industries that, but Bob, there are opportunities. I always like to look at it. There's difficulty in certain industries, but there will be opportunities within those industries. And I think one show in the past, Bob, you were talking about the hospitality industry, and it's a difficult industry to land in, but there are pockets where it's doing extremely well. So, look for those opportunities for your SBA lending team.
Yeah. Real quick, I know we're running over a little bit later, but I want to get to the question. Lance, during a loan review for loan docs, loan service notes that it is not actually a single member LLC, but he lists his spouse as a member. Do we move forward with this calculation or change the calculation as an LLC?
Are we talking about an existing 7A?
I don't know what we're talking about.
Well, it's almost like they're asking about a PPP loan
which
amount calculation, which with PPP funding dried up, Bob, I don't know that there's anything to calculate. Normally, you would calculate with both in determining the amount, but I'd like it, whoever asked this question, provide a little more detail so I can give a better answer to the question.
And I want to address this one real quick. Could the funds for waived guarantee fees run out prior to September? That's a separate allocation. I don't know the answer. I know Lance and Dustin don't.
I don't know the answer as well, but we did look the other day when John was on at the pace of SBA 7A and 504 lending. And, now that lenders are turning their attention away from PPP to 7A, Bob, it's possible.
I don't think I think if you're going to have an issue, you're going to have an issue with the program being capped.
Yeah,
but but Congress will do that. But I don't see them. I
think the guarantee fee waiver is fairly safe as long as the program is funded.
Lance, give me a real quick. What are we talking about on next Wednesday on your webinar?
Well, we're going to talk about what to do with not just PPP loans, but we're going to talk about dealing with servicing your SBA portfolio, including both PPP and 7A loans. How are you going to service those PPP loans that are not forgiven? How are you going to service the 7A loans that come out of 11, 12 payments and are having trouble? So it's a special servicing webinar for 7A and PPP. And
obviously, we're waiting for their guidance on 504, and as soon as we do that, we will roll that out. Lance, thank you very much. I know you're going to, we're still taking late registrations for our collateral webinar coming up, collateral and COVID. Dustin, thank you so much for joining us. Let's have you back on. Good luck in your travels, and I thank you for being a good citizen and spreading the good news of Main Street. How's that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, especially Dustin, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great day.